On this edition of Primetime Politics, federal vaccine mandates. As the Liberal caucus debates the issue and the Tories continue to call for them to be scrapped, we'll hear from an infectious disease specialist who says the time has come to lift the requirements for travel. Our journalist panel looks at the latest in the Conservative leadership race, with more than 600,000 memberships sold and sniping and jockeying continuing between the candidates. And we'll hear from one of those candidates, Leslyn Lewis, who's challenging the claims of record membership sales made by fellow candidate Pierre Poilievre. She says the Poilievre camp has actually signed up some of her supporters. But we start with the continuing debate over whether the last federal vaccine mandates for travelers should be lifted. The United States on Friday announced it was lifting its COVID testing of travelers at U.S. airports. Later in the day, Canada announced that random testing of vaccinated passengers at Canadian airports is being suspended until July 1st. As airports deal with a surge in delays, unvaccinated passengers will still require a test, and starting on July 1st, all testing will be done off-site. But in Friday's question period, Conservatives were on the attack, pressing the Prime Minister to end the mandatory vaccination for air travel in and to Canada.
Today's headline says it all, and I quote, "Massive majority of Liberal caucus wants the Prime Minister to drop federal COVID mandates." The report says that the Liberal member from the Yukon, a doctor and former medical officer of health, has given multiple presentations at Liberal caucus meetings on why the mandates need to be dropped. The member is a real doctor, not a spin doctor, but has the Prime Minister listened to him? Nope. Finally, the incoherence of a policy that is punishing and limiting the rights of Canadians is being realized by Liberal MPs. The Prime Minister won't listen to Canadians, but will he listen to his caucus?
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When are the Conservatives going to realize that COVID-19 is not over? The Conservatives are just in denial about the reality of this pandemic. We've seen numerous times the Conservatives trying to immediately remove all federal COVID-19 restrictions. While we're in a much better place today than we were previously, this pandemic's not over, and we must be prepared for any potential future scenarios. Our government will continue to assess the evolving situation at home and globally, monitor data, and adjust border measures as required.
Joining us now to discuss vaccine mandates is Dr. Zain Chagla. He's an infectious diseases physician at St. Joseph's Healthcare in Hamilton and also an associate professor at McMaster University. Dr. Chagla, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with, you have long been saying that vaccine mandates, the federal mandates, no longer make any sense. Why do you make that argument?
Yeah, these mandates, particularly as they deal with travel on trains and planes, the intent of these was to make sure that people on an aircraft or on a train would have lower risk of having COVID transmission or having COVID at the time. When these vaccines first came out, I think we had reasonable data to suggest with Alpha and Delta that the protection against symptomatic infection was actually quite high, in the sense that if you had an entire vessel full of people that are vaccinated, the probability of someone having COVID is much lower. With Omicron, things changed significantly, and we do know that vaccine efficacy has waned, that 2 doses of vaccines really doesn't provide that much symptomatic benefit, especially 20 weeks after that second dose, that 3 doses of vaccines may restore some of that efficacy. But even then, data from the United Kingdom suggests over time that wanes down, and at 20 plus weeks, the last estimates are 0 to 15% efficacy against symptomatic disease. And I think when you put that all together, when you go on a flight and you're sitting beside someone, you have no clue whether or not they're 2-dose vaccinated, 1-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccinated, 3-dose vaccinated, but 20 plus weeks ago. And so, you're really not necessarily reducing the risk in those contexts as compared to an unvaccinated person. I think once that fundamental argument breaks down, you really have to start talking about what is being taken away from individuals that isn't offering protection, that individuals that haven't chosen to get a vaccine, aren't able to travel when their risk, especially as many of them have had COVID at some point, really, doesn't change as compared to a vaccinated person with 2 doses or even a vaccinated person with 3 doses. that argument starts breaking down significantly.
Well, the interesting thing, though, is we just saw a briefing from the Canada Public Health Agency, and Dr. Theresa Tam made the argument, though, that even although it's not significant, she does talk about the third dose, people who are third dosed, that there is between a 40 and 50% efficacy, she says. So there is some protection is better than none, and that was one of the arguments she made for continuing on with the vaccine mandate. She also made the argument of possible variants internationally. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm not here to argue. The vaccines have incredible effects against people getting very ill with COVID. I think everyone should be getting their full vaccine series, and that's important. But, again, that 30 to 40% data comes from studies looking at big populations. And so some of those people in the populations may be very early in that vaccine third dose series. Some of those may be late. And when you balance all of those odds out, you start seeing 30 to 40%. The eventuality, though, in the UK, which is really tracking this data appropriately over time since that last dose, is really showing that as time progresses, things keep getting lower and lower and lower. And again, the mandate for travel is not 3 doses of vaccine. It is 2 doses of vaccine or 1 dose of a Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And so, again, who is actually on an airplane may not be someone that's optimally third dose that may have some protection against symptomatic disease. It could be 2 doses. It could be 1 dose. And recognizing that, I think, again, breaks down many of those arguments in terms of using it as a way of protecting that aircraft.
What about the other argument, and this did come up from Dr. Theresa Tam, and that is there is a hesitancy to take away vaccine mandates because, as you probably have witnessed, people aren't getting vaccinated anymore. And if there's absolutely no incentive anywhere in any human activity to have a vaccine, people are just going to abandon the efforts to get vaccinated.
I mean, again, outside of healthcare and federal restrictions, there really isn't a mandate to get vaccinated to do much. I will say, on November 30th, when vaccination was the only way to get on a vessel in Canada outside of medical exemptions, to, even up to a month ago when I last checked this, we're seeing vaccination, like primary first dose of vaccinations, only going up 2 to 3% in the adult population and really, really flattening out over the last 2 months. And so, again, it isn't meant to be a policy to incentivize people to get vaccinated. That's a positive medical decision. That goes on with the provider. But at the same time, I don't think we're even getting that in all of this. And again, we're getting much more division, much more divisiveness, recognizing that, people have access to alternate vaccines, people have access to treatment now. Many of the unvaccinated individuals have had COVID and their risk of subsequent serious disease has been significantly limited. All of this plays a role in how we interpret this in this modern age. Okay,
the accompanying question, though, must be asked then. If you're saying that it's counterproductive, it's not necessary to have vaccination for travel purposes, masking, would you then say, because we talk about layers of protection, if you're going to have a hodgepodge of people who are vaccinated and not on a plane, would it be, in your opinion, absolutely essential to have mandatory masking on planes and in places like public transit?
Yeah, look, I think, masking is an easier intervention. I think if we're going to make changes, again, allowing everyone to travel is probably the biggest thing. And then, looking at data from jurisdictions that have dropped masking in airplanes and seeing if there's been a rise in transmission associated with that. So, everything does need to be examined. Right now, I think masking on planes is reasonable, although, again, when the plane's in air, when planes are actually moving, people are taking off their masks constantly. There's adequate ventilation when things are moving and when the ventilation systems are on. And so masking may be, one of these things that can be used in certain settings like the airport, but not necessarily when things are in the air and the ventilation systems are running better than, most operating routes in the country. Okay, last question in just one word. Do you think we will see, there's a decision has to be made about July 1st at the end of June, whether the Canada Public Health Agency will maintain this regulation on vaccination for travelers? Do you think we'll see it lifted or maintained? I hope they lift it. This is affecting people in their real lives, right? People can't fly to see a funeral. People can't fly to see their families. I think we have to take this into account. And many international jurisdictions around the world are dropping these mandates for vaccination. I think we have to follow suit. Okay, Dr. Chagla, thank you very much for speaking with us. No problem. All the best.
This week, the Conservative leadership race continued to be one of the hottest topics of discussion in federal politics, with the Conservative Party saying that more than 600,000 people had taken out party memberships. In a few minutes, I'll speak with two journalists who have been following the race, but we start with one of the leadership candidates, Leslyn Lewis, who's challenging the claims of fellow candidate Pierre Poilievre, who says his camp has signed up more than 300,000 members. Lewis says she has evidence that the Poilievre campaign actually has been signing up some of her supporters. CPAC's Peter Van Dusen spoke with Leslyn Lewis.
Leslyn Lewis, first of all, thanks for taking time to speak with me. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Look, the party has now confirmed that well over 600,000 memberships have been sold for the leadership contest, but it says it won't be releasing preliminary lists until all of the applications have been vetted. So you may not see any membership lists until the end of July here at the latest. You're saying you want to see those lists now. What are you asking for?
We believe that the party is capable of preparing an interim list because every time a new candidate was approved for the race, we were given an up-to-date list. So we know that they have the capacity to do that. And we believe that they could release that information on an ongoing basis so that the race isn't halted and that there's more time for persuasion and for the members to get to know the other candidates.
Right. So if the party says no to that, which the party seems to be saying the vetting process is more important than releasing any lists now, do you accept that position? And if not, why not?
Well, the vetting process is very important, but I don't believe that they're mutually exclusive. They can vet up to a certain date and then release that information and then continue on with the vetting. So I don't believe that it has to be done all at once because it wasn't done like that before. We were able to vet as we went along, even though other members in the race, other candidates were still accumulating new members.
Mr. Poilievre's camp opposes the early release of the lists, and they signed up the most members. Given that, why should your team have early access to the people his team signed up to try and pull his supporters over to you? I guess that's the argument that side would make.
Well, it's not accurate that he signed up the most members. He claims to have signed up the most members. But based on my calculations, with the members that he claims to have signed up and what Patrick Brown claims to have signed up, and I know what I've signed up, and Roman also signed up members, and so did Scott. And we would really have to have around 900,000 for those numbers to be valid. And the party came out and said that the list is 600,000. Mm-hmm. Remember, we had more than 115,000 existing members. So if you add up just what Mr. Poilievre claims, what Mr. Brown claims, and what our existing numbers are, it doesn't add up. So we cannot trust what the other candidates have said their memberships are. We know from past experience that people always overinflate the number that they've signed up, and that's why I've decided not to play that game.
Yeah. Okay, so to be clear here, you're challenging the Poilievre camp. You're saying that they're not telling the truth about those numbers.
I don't know that they're deliberately not telling the truth, but I can give you one incident. A number of my supporters received an email from the Poilievre camp, which looked like an official email from the party saying, you're not registered, you can't vote. And so the last few days, they actually renewed on that membership site, which they thought was an official party site. And so Mr. Poilievre has a number of my supporters, thousands,
really?
in his database. And other camps, that also happened to other camps also. So the last few days, we spent a lot of time trying to calm people down that they weren't going to be able to vote for us. And so did Mr. Baber's camp also.
Okay, so yeah, that's interesting. So a lot's being made of who sold how many memberships, but how many did your team sign up?
Well, as I said, we signed up far more than we did when I won the popular vote in 2020. And that's what I'm prepared to say, because I really don't see the purpose of putting out your numbers right now unless you're trying to discourage the other camps. I want a fair race. I'm very confident in my numbers. I'm very confident in my supporters. And I think that the membership will speak for itself.
Right, but I mean, memberships you sell can be a good indication of the support for your campaign. And you're saying, you're challenging the Poilievre numbers, and you're saying you did better than you did the last time, but you won't tell us your numbers. So how do we know your numbers are accurate?
Well, my numbers are accurate because I'm not telling you what they are. Because if I was going to tell you what they are, I would do what the others did, most likely, and inflate them. And I don't believe that's very genuine. And so I've decided that I don't want to opt into that way of doing politics. I want to do politics differently. So I will let the members speak for themselves. I'm confident in my numbers, and I believe that I have enough numbers to win.
Okay, so I mean, I know you're challenging Mr. Poilievre's numbers, but let's suggest, for the purpose of our continuing discussion here, that the Poilievre camp sold more memberships than anyone else, no matter what that number is, and notwithstanding the importance of where they are geographically, because that all figures into the riding point system. Are those membership numbers that you think Mr. Poilievre, he's claiming, I get it, are they enough to make him a winner on the first ballot? Do you think that's where we're headed?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not, especially because when we know, if we take his numbers that he claims and Patrick Brown's numbers that he claims and the existing numbers, the other campaigns would have had to sell negative numbers in order for their numbers to be real. So with 600, even if he claims to have sold 300, he can't win on the first ballot.
You and Pierre Poilievre stand for a lot of the same things, and you're very unapologetic about your social conservative values. And I guess I'm wondering why you think, you would make a better leader for the Conservative Party than Pierre Poilievre.
Because I believe a leader has to be able to talk about all issues. Yes, I am pro-life. The majority of my friends are pro-choice. I don't run from conversations with them. We have healthy conversations about what we agree on. And my position is that we can actually have people with different opinions, and we agree on policies that will unite the country and that will prosper the nation. I am not afraid to do interviews and to talk about issues and to recognize that we have people with divergent perspectives within this country. To hide from that, I don't believe is a efficient way to lead a party or a country.
We begin, as soon as we start the membership list and we get to see those released to the camps, that is what we call the persuasion phase of a leadership race. What's your path to victory?
Well, my path to victory is being an honest, forthright politician, really focusing on my policies, not focusing on tearing the other candidates down, but uniting the country behind issues such as building a strong economy, protecting our environment, upholding our democracy, ensuring that our sovereignty is entrenched and that it's not being encroached upon by global organizations. These are some of the issues that I feel are fundamental to the survival of our nation. And those are the issues that I look to focus on uniting various regions within our country and recognizing that we can move together in the future for prosperity by bringing our supply chains home and focusing on what is going to improve the lives of our citizens in this country.
Look, there have been two official leadership debates, and there seems to be some momentum building for a third debate. Would you welcome a third debate? Because, the September 10th decision day is a long way off, and my guess is that the party members would want to hear more from the candidates.
Well, there's actually been 3 debates, and there was one debate that was canceled with the Independent Press Gallery, which I believe we should have had. Before I would welcome a fourth debate, I believe that we should have that debate with the Independent Press Gallery. I don't think it's very fair to them that we cancel their debate and then go to another. And another thing that I would demand is that we focus on the policies and the issues. I don't want mudslinging. I don't want bravado. I don't think that it reflects very well on the party when we have people tearing each other apart on the stage. And I really don't feel good about participating in that type of activity again. So if we can have clear rules around how we're going to conduct ourselves, then maybe it would be productive. Otherwise, I do not feel that it's necessary.
All right. Conservative Party leadership candidate Leslyn Lewis. Thanks for your time. Great to talk to you. And as I say to all the candidates, good luck and hope we talk again.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Joining me now are two members of the Parliamentary Press Gallery. Stephanie Levitz is a national political reporter with the Toronto Star, and Ian Bailey is a parliamentary reporter for the Globe and Mail. First of all, both of you, welcome.
Hi,
thank you.
Good to see you.
Let's start with something. First of all, we were talking earlier in the show about the pressure that the Trudeau government's coming under to remove these vaccine mandates for travellers. The government has announced something today, Friday. It is suspending random testing of vaccinated travellers until July 1st, and then all testing is going to be moved off-site, out of the airports. Any reactions to that? Thoughts on that, Stephanie?
So, I mean, this was a decision that was taken almost in lockstep with some changes, but the way the United States was handling testing for COVID for inbound travelers into that country.
Okay.
So it's sort of nice to see the two countries moving in lockstep, because there's been a lot of pressure from the travel industry on both sides of the border to do things to make the flow of travel swifter and a lot easier for travelers this summer. Everyone needs that boost of tourism energy into their bottom lines, while of course recognizing that COVID, are we moving into this sort of endemic phase of COVID where it is just going to be ever present, and constant surveillance is daunting, I guess, for the industry, for the airports, speeding up some of these bottlenecks. So it's certainly a bit of a political win, Martin, for the Conservatives, and they were the main opposition party really pushing for changes at the border. Mm-hmm. And we'll see what it does to COVID rates in Canada. I mean, isn't that always the argument here the government has tried to advance? They're going to follow the science. Okay. So we'll see where the science leads us.
And we'll see also, obviously, the big decision about vaccination mandates in terms of vaccinated travelers. That decision doesn't get made until July 1st when the current requirement expires. Let's look at the Conservative leadership race. Both of you have been following it day by day, blow by blow. 600,000 members, at least, we've been told by the party. Party says it won't even have the actual tally of vetted numbers and members until the end of July. And it says it won't be giving results about which camps got how many members. We've already just heard from Leslyn Lewis. She says that she has evidence that supporters some of her supporters are being claimed by Pierre Poilievre. Both of you, what are you watching for as this process continues to unfold? Let's start with you, Ian.
Well, waiting to see how the party has said it will proceed to sort of measure these members, to sort of validate these members, these membership claims, and waiting to see how that plays out in the weeks ahead, waiting to see how many members there really are. The party has said the numbers will go down, but even if they go down by 100,000 or whatever they go down, the metrics here look very promising for the Poilievre campaign. Also waiting to see what the campaigns frankly do in the coming months. This isn't over yet. It's not a case where the vote is next week or 2 weeks from now or even 3 or 4 weeks from now. There's still a long way to go in this race, so waiting to see how the camps try to make their claims, to try and build support going forward, and to see what I guess the perceived front runner, Mr. Poilievre, does in terms of policy and in terms of making these numbers work for him, and maybe winning this thing down the road. Okay,
I want to get back to that in terms of actually translating these numbers into votes come September. Stephanie, what are you watching as this vetting process goes on?
In your lead in there, Martin, you used the phrase blow by blow. And hasn't this leadership race really been about blow after blow after blow that candidates have been trying to land on each other? And so one thing I'm watching for is to what extent that continues. Do they continue, some of the front runners, their negative and, sometimes quite vicious attacks on each other? Some will argue that that's part of the membership sales process. You've got to motivate people to buy a membership, and you do that with a negative attack ad strategy. And some will say that needs to continue because you also need to motivate and get these people to the polls. I mean, let's remember, in the 2020 leadership race for the party had about 270,000 members that were signed up for that contest. That was a record number at the time, but only, voter turnout was just over half of that. And so 600,000 may seem like a big number, but at the end of the day, two things matter. One, how many people actually show up to vote, and two, where they vote, because the party doesn't just use a one member, one vote system. It's this complicated points thing where every riding is actually treated equal. So it's all fine and well if candidate X signed up 70,000 members, let's say, in one singular riding. At the end of the day, those are only worth 100 points. And so what candidates need to win is the majority of points. And so some of these candidates will be doing a very targeted riding by riding, get out the vote strategy And it'll be interesting to watch that play out to the extent that we see it play out publicly.
Okay, Ian, I'll ask you this, and I'll come back to you on this, Stephanie. Obviously, 600,000 members, and it would seem to be, we'll see what the actual final tally is at the end of July. 600,000 members is a lot, and as you mentioned, Stephanie, it's more than double of what they had in the last leadership race 2 years ago when they chose Erin O'Toole. How impressive is this? Is this an unsurmountable lead for Pierre Poilievre? Because his people claim they have 311,000 of those members. And should the Liberals be worried?
Well, it's probably, it's certainly a significant number. As Stephanie pointed out, obviously the point system, is relevant here. It's certainly a daunting number. It's an impressive metric, as I said earlier, for Mr. Poilievre. As for the Liberals, I mean, the next election, assuming the NDP, the agreement they have with the NDP holds, is a number of years away. So, the Liberals should probably be watching this to see how it plays out, how the rest of the leadership race plays out, and assuming who the winner is, and how, assuming it's Mr. Poilievre or whoever it is, how they sort of come into the leadership role and where they take the party. Maybe a bit too early for the Liberals to sort of ring the alarm bell, but it's certainly something they should be watching, but waiting to see how it ends, perhaps before getting too alarmed, I would guess.
Okay.
Figuring out how to get alarmed.
Okay, Stephanie, about the numbers, and then I also want to ask about Patrick Brown, who says he will not run for a seat as MP if Monsieur Poilievre wins the race. Two different stories there.
Okay, I'll pick up on the numbers first. I mean, one interesting thing about the numbers, let's remember that membership cards for the Conservative Party cost about $15 if you buy a one-year membership.
Yeah.
If you just do some simple math, $15 times 600,000 members, that's $9 million in the pockets of the federal Conservative Party. So if I'm the Liberal Party, I'm looking at that and I'm wondering about my decision to, end paid membership a number of years ago, because that's a lot of money. I also think it's a fascinating tally when you think about expanding the base of the party. And I would hope that whoever the new leader is, and even the current leadership of the party, are thinking about how to keep these members engaged for the next 3 months. I mean, never mind the outcome of the race and after. These are, 600,000 people who are now card-carrying members of the Conservative Party. And does the party not owe them some kind of duty? Should they hold another debate, for example, in this leadership race? Should there be some ways to engage them and lay the groundwork now for the inevitable post-leadership race drop-off? Because a number of these members would have signed up specifically to vote for a particular candidate. And here's a nice segue to Patrick Brown. Patrick Brown has staked his campaign really on expanding the base of the party into a pool that he believes has been almost insulted by the party in the past. And he's trying to reclaim those votes and reclaim that support. If he's managed to recruit a large share of voters from ethnically diverse communities into the party, will they stay if Patrick Brown leaves? And now he's sort of made it clear that he will leave. If he doesn't win, he's out. And so what does that mean for his membership pool? Because that would be a huge detriment, I think, to the party, Martin. There is a chance to reach some new party members and start developing and being thoughtful about policy from different points of view, and maybe take it in that direction. Okay, a last point to you briefly. Ian, we're running out of time, but your thoughts on Patrick Brown's ultimatum saying that he will not run for MP if he doesn't win the leadership?
Well, he would be running, I guess, way down the road. I agree with what Stephanie was saying, and it's going to be interesting to see if Mr. Poilievre ends up winning this thing, if he can keep these front runners together. I don't know if Mr. Charest plans to run if he doesn't win. We'll see what he has to say about it. But that may be a challenge for Mr. Poilievre. He's been very combative on the leadership race, but hasn't shown many indications of bringing these folks together into a team that would be working after September once this thing is resolved. Okay, well, both of you, we will look forward to future discussions on guess what topic. Thanks, both of you, for weighing in. Have a great weekend.
Take good care. Thanks.
Well, that's all for another edition of Primetime Politics on CPAC. I'm Martin Stringer. Thanks for watching, and have a great weekend.